Hello, and welcome to our webinar, From Legacy to Liftoff, the New Era of Airline Retailing. I'm Apurva Mathur. I'm a Vice President of Strategic Accounts at DataArt, and I'll be guiding our discussion today as we explore the evolving landscape of airline retailing. So this is the first in a series of new thought leadership series that we have. Uh, and it's a forward-looking conversation on how to modernize airline systems and retailing strategies. As the technology evolves around us and the traveling public wants to consume travel in an Amazon-like manner, we in our industry need to take a look at our legacy systems that have served us well over the decades and see how we can adapt to what a new modern technology stack looks like, and then also meet the expectations of the next generation of our consumers of travel. So before we begin, let me just go over some housekeeping items. We're going to plan on an engaging discussion for the next 45 minutes. We'll leave the last 15 minutes for a Q&A session. Feel free to post your questions in the chat, and then we'll try to cover as many of them as we can. All right, so let's get started. So today I'm pleased to be joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Let me introduce my first guest, Sam Chamberlain. He's the Chief Product Officer at FLYR. Sam, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, I'm really happy to be here and to have this engaging discussion. So as Apurva said, I'm the Chief Product Officer at FLYR. I'm based in New York City, and I've spent a little over 20 years in the travel industry at a mixture of being at an airline and at multiple software vendors. So I've had a really good kind of exposure to a lot of the history of the industry, a lot of the challenges that the industry faces. My expertise covers pricing, revenue management, inventory management, booking and shopping travel platforms, and now in the offer and order management space. So I'm really focused on bringing innovation and change to the industry. So really excited to be here.
Thanks, Sam. Next, let me introduce Timothy O'Neill Dunn. He's a strategic advisor to DataArt. Timothy, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, good day, everybody, from wherever you are. I could say good morning, good afternoon, whatever, but it's going to be good day. I'm the principal of T2 Impact, and as Apurva said, I am a senior advisor to DataArt. We're a consulting group in aviation and travel, but I'm sort of religiously focused on the customer. I think about the customer all day long. So, but I'm also an av geek, and I love planes. When I found out that trains couldn't fly, I kind of moved myself towards looking at aviation. I could see it's quite an illustrious audience today. That's great, and I'm looking forward to this discussion. And I have to apologize to everybody on the audience, is that you're going to be unfortunately hearing from two Brits today, but I'm very happy to be here.
All right, I think we can handle that, Timothy and Sam. All right, so let's get started. So today we'll be diving into three critical areas. The first is the challenges posed by airline legacy infrastructure. The second is strategies around modern, seamless integration of retailing. And then the third is the transformative role that AI plays in the new offer order retailing space. So let's get started. First topic, Sam, I'll leave this for you to take a stab at. What are the challenges of legacy systems today and the aging standards in the airline industry?
Thanks, Apurva. I think the challenges, the problems can really be encapsulated very, very simply by saying things haven't changed a lot. Things are hard. Change is hard. And systems haven't really sort of moved on in many, many years. The industry has gone through a bit of sort of stagnation in technological innovation and change. And so the challenge that airlines are facing is the the software, the technology, the environment they operate in, the standards, and the slow changing pace of standards makes it hard for them to sort of really adapt. But at the same time, everything else in sort of society, in business, in industry is really moving at a very, very fast pace. And I'm sure that the travel industry and the airline industry isn't the only industry that moves slow, but it's definitely one of them. And it's definitely easy for consumers and passengers and travel buyers to notice that the industry is not keeping up with standards and innovation and the way that modern retail works. And again, this is really back to the industry. Airlines deal with monolithic technology. They deal with aging technology. They deal with technology that was built decades ago to handle and manage something that is very, very different today than what it was decades ago. So I think those represent some of the challenges and what aging standards and sort of legacy systems mean. And the result of all of that is it means they can't move forward very quickly. Innovation is really stifled, and up until very recently, airlines have sort of been forced to just live with it and just wait for this slow pace of change to keep creeping forward. And I think now, with everything in the industry, in other industries and adjacent industries moving so fast around airlines, I think airlines are getting tired of waiting. I think they're getting to the point now where enough's enough in terms of having to wait, and there needs to be a way that those barriers become broken down.
I think,
Sam?
I'm
Timothy,
100% with Sam on this one, but I think we have to dive into there's as much to do with the technology as a lot is to do with processes, and it is the processes, obviously. What comes first, the process or the technology? And because airlines tend to be risk averse and more silo oriented, they've kind of solidified or ossified themselves. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, because it's resulted in a very safe system. But I think I agree with Sam that what we need to look at is how the consumer has evolved. I'm a baby boomer, so I'm one of the really old guys. I can remember the first time I interacted with a reservation system, and surprise, surprise, it was actually on a printer. It was a teletype printer that was printing stuff sort of backwards and forwards. Nowadays, we sort of expect information to be instantaneous. Google trained us to expect instant answers. Whether they were right or not kind of was immaterial. You got an answer. And so we become sort of information gratified very easily. And also, I think that there's a change in the population. So this is both a technological issue and I think a cultural one. What Amazon and Alibaba, AliExpress, and Shein and Temu have taught us is, I want that one. Give me that one. And I want it now. So you kind of want to say that that's how you want to evolve. And I want to go back to Apurva's point, which is we are dealing with legacy systems. Now, they have served us incredibly well. If you can look at all these different systems that fit together, are they fit for purpose anymore? I think the general industry has agreed that we need to move to offer and order. And that's where we need to be. To do that, we have to be able to respond to the consumer who says, I want that one. I want to go to the Taylor Swift concert in Singapore. I want to go to the Coldplay concert, or even, God help me, Oasis. And I can, because I'm old enough to remember those people, that this is what we want. And we want to sort of remove that friction from the consumer. We want to be in a place where actually that thing, I can actually point to it and say, I want that one. And we can serve it up. But today's infrastructure doesn't permit that. So we need to do something more. And sadly, I think that the pace of change of these standards is part of the thing that's holding us up.
Yeah, so the standards is really interesting, because even when new standards get created with the hope of trying to either accelerate or unlock, they inevitably get kind of into that bottleneck situation again, where it actually takes a long time to create the standard, and it takes a long time to roll out the standard, and it takes a long time for airlines to adopt a standard. So a new standard or a new frontier or a new way of doing things has been proposed and has been put into new standards over the last decade or two. But compared to when they were introduced and when they're actually adopted, now a really long time has passed again. So I think
I would agree. I mean, look at how long it took to get sort of NDC fully. Right. And we're talking, you know, it was more than 13 years ago, and I was there at the start of that. And we were just looking at solving this by saying, well, look, can we encapsulate data and put it into an XML feed? And the airline said, well, I'd like to have offer first. Yeah, because you've got the most bang for the buck out of the offer side. But what about this order thing? And I think that we all know what the challenge is. And I think, Sam, you and I can agree that it is about how do we execute that in the fastest possible way without disrupting the operational excellence that has existed in the airline system for so long. And therefore, I think we have to look also by saying, look, adoption is very different from setting. So setting a standard and adopting it has been the big challenge, I think, that has taken way too long. In the good old days of airlines, that was fine. You know, PSC did it once a year, and then, hey, presto, you're just fine. That's no longer fit for purpose. We have to adjust to the same time and speed, as you pointed out, that the consumer is operating at, so that we can remove this friction and move to that point. And I think that you start to see that AI is going to have a huge impact, but we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah. Timothy, I want to make one comment, almost to strike a note of humor, but to give anyone who travels that might not know anything about how the industry works, proof that the industry has struggled to adapt and move forward over decades and decades. You just mentioned that you have these, I'll call it fond memories of the early days of booking reservations and the old dot matrix.
I want to be clear, I did not say fond.
I put fond in there because I think we have to look back nicely on it, because it did do a good thing for us. But you know, we were using these dot matrix printers to kind of like run passenger manifests and things like this. And if you are traveling today, tomorrow, you pay attention when you're at the boarding gate or when you're on the end of the jet bridge, you will still see the Oki printer. You will still see that dot matrix printer there. It's still running today. Maybe not from 40 years ago, but it's still using the same thing. So it's kind of interesting how there is proof in plain sight that these old things are still around us. So.
Yeah, I was at an airport just yesterday, and you know, the flight plans are still, you know, pushed out through those documents. So you see the pilots come to the gate agent desk, and you see them, you know, printing reams of paper on what's, you know, weather, flight plans, NOTAMs, etc.
So they sort of flash it around. Yeah.
We need to be careful.
The important things.
Yeah. All right, great.
Yeah,
so
when I used to
go ahead.
Go ahead, Trevor. I was saying that I always check. I like to be at the gate early at this because I'm, you know, I like to watch the process of boarding because it's like I'm a bit of a geek about that sort of thing, and I always check the pilots when they board, right? Because if they're carrying a big satchel, a big bag, I know we're in a paper organized airline. If they're carrying a little laptop and they've got electronic flight bag 3, then I'm going to feel a lot safer because I know that they've got the information right there at their fingertips. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I always check, you know, the age of the aircraft. How old is that plane? Can it actually fly, you know, safely? I always worry about those sort of things. But yeah, going back to this issue of paper, the benefit that paper has is it's tangible and people can really get behind that. But I think that today's consumer no longer regards paper as safe. They regard what's in their hand. This is their safety. This is what they think about. And I think we need to ensure that whatever we do, it's always data driven.
Okay. All right. I think it's time to move on to the second topic. I mean, now that we've discussed some of the challenges of legacy systems, so what are the key modernization strategies for ensuring a seamless transition? And, we have to admit it, coexistence with existing legacy systems. So, what are your thoughts? Maybe Timothy, you can take this discussion topic.
Oh, how long do we have, Apurva? How long
Well,
do we have?
we're all in the
Give me
airline
the time.
industry, so we need to be on time. So you got
Right, there we go.
we got 10 minutes.
I think that the critical thing is that we've considered going through the transition in a sort of layered approach. But the fundamental decision was made several years ago to sideline that and look at the true twin paths of change. One is to go from virtualization of inventory through the seat buckets into some kind of offer, which the airlines did fairly well, but they were still constrained by the seat bucket situation, to what I would call true decision-based virtualization of the inventory into an offer that the customer can accept. And I think that that's fundamental. The other side of this is we can't rely upon the P&R because the P&R is no longer fit for purpose. So the question really should be is, how do we go to that layer? How do we talk to the inventory in a more modern way so that we can create true orders? And then we can also, true offers, and we can also then take in true orders. And I think this is what you're seeing within the industry. This is what Amadeus is saying that Nevio will do. It's what Sabre is saying Mosaic will do. It's what Fairlogics is saying Flex One is going to do. And I'm sure, Sam, you can talk about what FLYR is doing because you have the benefit of a greenfield. But if we don't go here, we don't attack it that way, I think we've got serious challenges because we can't go through this layer of translation paper, if you like, because that's how it was originally designed anymore. That's no longer fit for purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a very, very important foundational question, a very simple question, like why hasn't the industry changed? Why hasn't this barrier been broken? We've talked about standards, we've talked about complexity a little bit, but technology is ubiquitous. The rate of change and progression is extremely high. It's not rocket science, and I sometimes describe it that way to people. This industry isn't about the complexity because the subject matter itself is hard. It's complex because of the convolution. It's very convoluted kind of set of software technology and things.
Great word.
Together. It's that's kind of how when I'm hiring people that are not from the industry into FLYR, I'm explaining to them this isn't about kind of the complex subject matter. You don't need to be a rocket scientist or a brain surgeon. You need to be able to unpick the convoluted side of the complexity, and that's what's made airlines kind of scared to make change and scared to actually take those steps, because there's a fear and anxiety in touching this monolithic thing that is so big and so important, because if it breaks, if your reservation booking servicing platform breaks and it goes wrong, somebody's going to lose their job, the airline's going to lose money, and a lot of passengers are going to be very, very unhappy. And so it becomes a very overwhelming thing. So one of the ways that sort of I look at this, and is very important, at least for FLYR, and I'm sure others in the industry, is how do we no longer make it monolithic? How do we make it so this is a problem that can be solved and tackled in pieces, in steps, which means we don't want to really go to an airline and say, you have to take that really, really big and scary and daunting decision to move completely away in one fell swoop from what you have today. Mm-hmm. But instead, you can start to look at things a little bit more piecemeal. And that was never the case a decade or more ago. It was either you have this big monolithic stack from this vendor or you have it from this vendor. And there may be small little pieces of the puzzle around it. But what if we chop up those pieces? So there's lots of pieces, and you can start by taking these pieces from one vendor, and maybe you can complement them with pieces from another vendor, but you can move at a little bit of a safer pace. You can start to get value by saying, okay, I'm going to start thinking about the offer creation process, but I'm not going to get into order complexity just yet, right? I want to get the value and the advantage of contextualizing an offer or personalizing an offer for my guest. So back to your, I want that one, or, let me kind of write my own kind of shopping cart here of what I want. That, if we can make that possible without saying to the airline IT leadership, hey, you have to switch off this old big thing and you have to implement this new big thing, I think that is the way that we start to break this sort of monolith fear of what was there in the past. And that means opening up more open standards. Like, it means being a little bit less territorial about how, don't have to mandate that all the eggs go in one basket, things like this. It means, extending the standards that are there and going beyond them to say we can make things work amongst different providers, amongst different technologies, so that the airline can actually move along now. And I think that's an important step.
I think if I can sort of put this into two parts to that. First of all, I'm going to violently agree with you about the splitting up the stuff, this monolithic thing, into microservices, because that clearly is how almost universally there are very few monolithic systems that are even designed these days. Everything is done in component form or in microservice form. But turning a PSS into microservices is no trivial matter. And I'm involved in various cases of trying to address that problem. And we've already actually done it, abstracting value and abstracting systems, but not forgetting, of course, that whatever you do has to be A, well instrumented, and B, you've got to be able to extract the right amount of data to manage it, which I think was always kind of an afterthought. So that's one thing. I'm going to slightly disagree with you, Sam, about the selection of the monolithic thing, because in the long period of time that I've worked with airlines and GDSs, I can tell you that almost universally never bought one thing from one vendor. There was always bits on the side. And I think they were a lot bigger than people sort of realized. And even if you look today, look at revenue management systems, almost universally, they're coming from somebody else. And then you look at the distribution systems, the websites. So we've already got, I would say, layers, but they were not architected as layers. They were really just, they're happenstantial more than anything else. This is the retail layer, this is the selling layer, this is the inventory layer, this is the operations layer. So I think we have to look at this in a more fundamental way to build, I would say, a far stronger architecture that supports modularity. And I think one of the benefits that we're seeing is across the board, we are in fact now starting to see people talk about that modularity. And it comes at a fairly expensive proposition when you look at the expense of what it's going to take to create these microservices, create these modules that you can then replace. But I do believe that there are things that can be done, and they don't have to be big bang. They can be done in stages. But you also have to go back and look at the processes. It can become this, what drives it, the process or the technology. And what I find is that in many places, the process was ossified because the technology was seen as immutable. Now, when you change that, people are saying, well, I can't do it because the process is the same. I'll say, well, look, we fixed this problem, now let's go fix that one. Look at the issue of the ticket, for example. People still think about the ticket. The ticket's, it's a ticket to ride. It just gets you through the door. That's all it's supposed to do, right? It's not supposed to do anything else. So when you look at an order is far richer. It does a whole lot more. And look how we went to the complexity of, oh my God, I'm going to have to charge for an SSR. Oh, what do you do? Yes. So these sort of things become a lot easier when you unbundle that process and you start to think of that process in a different way. And I'm really happy to see that we're doing it. I'm just incredibly frustrated with the pace of change.
Yeah, of course. And, I think even I completely agree with your point, actually, that there are still pieces that can come together, even historically from different providers. But even when you take one of those pieces, that piece alone can still be kind of way more complex than it needs to be. And what's sort of a strange irony is that a lot of how these sort of technology solutions and software have been built in the past decade or more have often been microservices based, or they have been sort of API or services driven, but sort of private. So if you take a booking, if you take P&R, for example, or maybe shopping is a better example, it requires lots of different pieces to come together. And under the covers or under the umbrella of that software provider, it comes together through a collection of microservices or a collection of internal APIs between the software. So actually uncoupling it for external purposes was never really kind of a huge step. Mm-hmm. So part of it is technology and part of it is just kind of business decision and commercial consideration and sort of like breaking down this kind of everything sort of like bundled together kind of mentality a little bit. So I remember in one of my previous roles, sort of building new software, but still not exposing broken down parts of that, which would have given value theoretically to an airline, because we wanted that to be internal. We wanted that to be kind of like a piece that we maintained. And then if you get to a point where you say, I'm going to expose it and I'm going to uncouple it and unbundle it, it's not actually that difficult to do. So it takes technology steps, and it takes sort of like the process steps, like you mentioned, to happen at the same time.
And I think people, airlines, because they are about efficiency and safety first, is they tend to be reluctant to attack any of those things. But there are so many of these processes that can go forward. Just look at the situation of how you deal. We talked about earlier before we started about the gate and waving pieces of paper around, right? It used to be that you would have to have 2 or 3 people running a gate. I wonder and marvel at how American Airlines and Delta and United at their mega hubs, how quickly and easily they can now have a single person manage that. I look at, so I'm in Seattle, so I look at how Alaska does it, where Alaska is actually doing away with the kiosks because they're saying, I don't need to do that. Everything is here. We look at how airports can reduce the amount of friction in order to get to that point. And I think that people, because of this issue of safety and efficiency, have tended to err on the overkill rather than the underkill. So the processes that we talk about, I think, again, we'll be in agreement here, but it's driven from the business side. What business value proposition does it come? And it really takes somebody with a very large scalpel to come in and say, why am I doing this? Why is this particular service necessary? I mean, I laugh at baggage because, I love the issue of baggage because it's one of the most complex and hidden pieces that out there. And in the baggage case, everything is tracked on the outbound. There are almost zero tracking capabilities for baggage in the arrival hall. Zero just doesn't exist. Why not? Well, that's because somebody makes a cost decision. So some of these decisions become very hard. But I think it does take this scalpel approach to the processes and the business reasons why you drive them, to ask, why do I need that? So that when you look at the legacy carriers, look at Ryanair. Ryanair is a great example. Why do I need this? They always say, why do I need it? And as a result, they've slashed almost everything out. It's an incredibly simplistic. You see that same methodology and if you like, philosophy applied many of the low-cost carriers in order to improve the efficiency that keeps the cost down. If everybody would say, how much does it actually cost me to be a full service carrier versus being a low cost carrier? And then you say, okay, what's the delta? Would you choose? I think people would think differently if they had to pay for the true cost of that.
Yeah,
All right.
I absolutely agree. But one thing I would just add before we go on to the next to the next section, the why that you talked about, I think also now applies to why change now. We've been in this boat for a long time. We know that we want something better, or maybe the question is really what am I going to get that is better if I change now? Because I have to get something. I don't think an airline is going to go from the current world to a new world where they can tell their employees and they can tell the industry we're using offer and order management technology, but we're doing the same thing. They have to actually get something else out of it, right? So I think one of the drivers of change is partly modernizing technology and thinking about you could do all these nice things in the future and you can go faster, but also straight away, if I start moving in pieces, remember, my technology landscape towards offer and order, I can start getting new valuable things straight away that I wasn't getting in the past. And there are some
the early wins, absolutely
exactly.
essential here. And the part of the challenge that we have is that too often the airlines have been more concerned about, but myself. I think we need to move, as particularly when we look at AI, and hopefully this is a good lead in, Apurva, that we look at AI and what AI can and cannot do for us. In the most cases, there is a lot it can do, but are we set up for it? So I think that's your next topic, Apurva.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, there's no conversation can be complete without, discussion AI. But I want to focus the discussion on how it's going to impact retailing and what we can do. So, let's start that discussion on how AI plays a transformative role in airline retailing.
Yeah,
Sam, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll just sort of come at it a couple of different ways. So just the word AI, I mean, talk about buzzword and sort of talk about hardly being able to keep up with what's going on in kind of the world of AI. But it certainly is more than a buzzword. What AI can do to impress and how it can actually start to solve challenges that maybe we didn't even know we had is quite remarkable right now. What I'm seeing it being used for is remarkable. And in my head, I sort of carve it up into three broad categories of how it starts to solve problems and bring value in this industry. One, the volume of data that the industry now has available, that an airline has available to it in order to be able to make decisions, make predictions, to optimize either revenue or operations or practices or whatever, is so extreme and is increasing all the time. And the readiness and the availability of that data is kind of improving, like into kind of constant real-time streams of huge volumes of data. The AI models, learning models, prediction models are well placed to go and leverage a rich universe of data to go and try and find signals that help that piece of software make more intelligent, smarter decisions of how it's going to operate. So a good example of that is we talked about passengers wanting something for them. I want that thing that I've decided, but I also want the airline to offer something to me that is specific, that is almost unique to me. I want, in many cases, the airline to know more about what I'm looking for here. I want offers to be created and tailored for me, for the purpose that I'm traveling, or the attributes that I bring and that are important to me. And so AI, in terms of learning models and mechanisms, is very important, very relevant there, to kind of mine all of this data, to process and learn from it, and to make those predictions and recommendations to bring optimization and intelligence to the airline. So that's one piece. The second piece is agentic AI. And thinking of AI in terms of tooling and automation and bringing autonomy, chatbots, agents that are part of the product itself. So when you actually go shopping for travel or third-party products that the airline is selling, the AI agents are helping you with the buying process. They're helping you with your end-to-end travel process. It's the AI agent that's actually telling you, your flight's going to be delayed and what would be your preference if I could get you on a different flight. And by the way, let's get you fast-track security at the airport because this connection is tight. It's the AI agent taking care of all of these things. And then the third piece is a bit more behind the scenes and is more on the vendor side, is the ability to leverage AI, and again, AI tools and agentic AI, to build the software in the first place. Because, and this is where we've seen sort of like almost miraculous improvements and the field come on leaps and bounds over the last 6 to 12 months alone. Building software using AI tooling can improve not only efficiency, but the quality of what you can improve. It can help with identifying testing that the airline needs to be able to run on their software and things like this. So it's finding a place in lots of different aspects of the passenger, the software you put in front of the passenger, how you build the software itself, personalization, and we'll think of more and more things for it to do as well. So.
Okay, I think it's, I'm going to pick on just one part of that because we're constrained a little bit on time. The thing that I want to pick on is this issue of the interaction of what AI can do for the customer. I love this, the concept of agentic AI. I think that the move towards OOSD, I think it's missing an S. The S is service. So you've got offer, order, settle, deliver. But we seem to have forgotten that we have to do this service. And I think this is a key value proposition that an agent can, in fact, do the various things that you're talking about there, Sam. And when you sort of look at this ability to preempt the way things happen, and you can actually say, all right, how can I make a decision? I've got 189 passengers standing in front of me. Who do I operate where in order to get the best and most optimal solution? In the past, that was the person wearing the red coat or something similar inside the airport. Now, it should be a machine learned language model that actually knows what to do and how to best optimize that. So we don't have those sort of issues, and they can be limited so that the key value propositions to the various constituent stakeholders is clearly and well communicated. I mean, we're even working on some of those projects as to how to deal with disruption. Disruption management is, the airline's worst nightmare, and it's always an afterthought. Can't we just put that into the front and then get this S? But I also want to bring another factor into the equation, which is the volume of, I would say, fairly useless agent-based requests that AI is generating. I talked to an OTA about a month ago, and they showed me the number of Gen AI generated requests, and the number is scary, and the speed with which it's escalating is scary. And despite what Google and others are trying to do to constrain it, that's not going to happen. We need to have smart agents being able to address some of these queries that come in and sift through some of them, because otherwise you're just going to have people out there building cache, using agents to build cache, and that's going to hurt the airline enormously in the airline infrastructure. So the whole system is going to be at risk if we don't do something. So these are the sort of things that I think we can apply actual activity now using some of the tools you just talked about. And that's where I think we should go.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how to describe this. I don't know if I'd say it's a strange thought or it's an interesting thought that we get into this place of AI answering AI. When you've got this AI-driven kind of shopping and search volume, and then AI responding and answering that, it seems somewhat, I don't know, strange. But absolutely, that's what's needed and what will be happening. We'll be using AI and AI technology and agentic AI capabilities to solve the challenge of new problems arise from implementing AI in the first place itself, it will become a little bit circular or cyclical. I just going back to your first point there, Timothy. I want to beat myself up a little bit for not mentioning the importance of AI in service. Thank you for.
So you should. So you should, sir.
Yes, and I should, because it is the most troubling and the hardest part, right? Because it's very easy to sell, like relatively speaking. It's very easy to go and buy. It's very easy to create a process or a flow or a piece of the technology landscape to handle it. And if that was the end of the story, we'd be laughing and everything would be smooth and perfect. But where the wheels come off historically is when things go wrong and when you need to make changes.
Yeah.
And whether they're voluntary or involuntary, change is hard. Change for the passenger, change for disruption and their routine and their promise and the promise that the airline has made to them becomes very, very difficult. So applying AI to minimize and make the service and the change process far more frictionless is probably one of the most valuable pieces of the puzzle.
100%, 110% there. It's important. I think we should, a shout out to some of the airlines that are doing this. You're already seeing investment, and I saw the comment in the chat that some of the airlines are starting to do that. I was very impressed. I'm a Delta frequent flyer, so I can only comment from what I've seen, but I now know that all the big 3 US airlines are now doing a lot in baggage tracking to give you that sense of comfort. And it forestalls things because it arms you as the consumer with something that you can actually take a decision on. And this is what I think is important, is how do you stop being less than transparent if you're an airline and start arming your customer with information that she can use. And I think that in the past, it was this kind of big wall is, I know this stuff and I'm not going to tell you because I'm smarter than you and you're an idiot passenger. I'm obviously personifying that a little bit more than I should do. But it is something that we can do a better job at. We can do a better job to arm the consumer, and we can arm also the customer service people. I remember when we were working on the Emirates redesign, that was one thing that we looked very hard at. How could we empower the person who's walking around with a phone, with an iPad, so that any passenger can come up to you and say, how about X? And they'll have that instant activity and that capability of at least answering a question. Because you walk around an airport and you say to so-and-so who looks like they're wearing an airport uniform for the particular airline and say, can you help me? And they'll say no. And I think we need to move beyond that point. And that's where it becomes much better in the personalization. And this is where I see that there's a good advantage. And I'll leave you with one other thought, is that obviously AI is far too broad a term. And even agentic AI is too broad a term. I think that the architecture we're looking at now is the issue of smart agents and their component little agents who will go out there and do things for you. But overall, there's got to be a better way that we talk, not just human to machine, but also agent to agent, as you alluded.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Just one final thing I would say there, and it's a little bit of a shameless plug, but we're very happy at FLYR that we're making good progress on kind of addressing many of these things and sort of bringing this innovation. And I think a lot of the industry is watching to see what happens when Riyadh Air launches to sort of operate in this new world. And I think it's going to be sort of a bit of a milestone, a gate in the industry, if you like, to not only show that it's possible to go down this path, it's possible to achieve these new capabilities and these new value propositions for an airline as a business. I feel like there's a lot of spotlight there, as there should be, to see a lot of this new stuff, including kind of like AI capabilities, come together.
I think the the generation that's going to be traveling in the future expects it. So I think we need to really move on it quickly. All right, so it looks like we've sort of kept time, which is great. As airline people, we all need to. So let me just quickly summarize sort of what at least we've discussed on the webinar, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So what I could see was that, we looked at legacy standards and how those are holding airlines back. We sort of discussed a little bit about transition to offer order models and, how we can do that without major disruptions, because as we discussed, it's scary to take on something monolithic and try to sort of do a big bang approach. It's too risky. So we've looked at, what sort of, early wins we can do, especially in the offer space. To Timothy's point, I want that. I mean, that could be easily achievable.
Give it to me. Come on. I want it now. I'm a Gen Z. I want it now.
Yeah.
Too late. You already told us you're a baby boomer.
Oh, you wound me.
And we talked about the role of AI, not only in modular architecture, but also, how it's going to play a role in speeding things up for us, right? I mean, in order to get some of this out, we do need the help of AI to sort of generate the code, the technology to sort of get things done quicker. And then, hopefully we'll build a system in the very near future that is a single source of truth and sort of future-proof our ecosystem. So I think, gentlemen, it's been a engaging and really good discussion. So let's open it up for Q&A. We've got another 12 minutes or so to discuss any topics that the audience
I like the one that just came in.
Okay.
This one about there seems to be a lot of things that airlines could do to be better retailers. I'm going to throw a rock first, and then I'll hopefully recover from the rock. The rock is, I don't think airlines have the faintest clue what retailing is. I think it's an oxymoron. If you want to see true retailing, you have to look at people like Shein and AliExpress and Amazon and Temu and et al. That's retailing. We do a little bit of merchandising, but we don't do a lot. We need to, and I think we're afraid of it. We've come up with this idea that creating an offer and taking an order, well, gee whiz, isn't that great? That's retailing. No, retailing is what's on the shelf today that you can buy. Retailing is about creating promotions that are instantaneously and can be real-time volume. I think this is, and I see just another comment coming in, and I love Chris Emanishi's point. Yeah, it does need brave leaders inside the airline world, because what we're doing, I think on the technology side, and I think I'm going to sit on that side for a little bit with Sam, is we're creating not just the solution to today's problems, but we're also developing an architecture and a framework for modern retailing for the future. And that requires us to change a lot of what we do today. Who are those heroes that can actually start to push stuff out? You saw what Ryanair, because I think they are a hero in retailing, in moving things forward. You can see that the legacy carriers really struggle with that. And I think that they need to learn some of those lessons that some of even their low-cost friends or their affiliates or even their competitors are doing. And we all need to see a better set of, I think, principles about retailing, because what we're trying to do, sitting on the technology side, is to come up with those solutions. What we have to do is to recognize that AI can really help in both the generation and the acceptance and management, and of course, the servicing, even up to disruption of these type of systems.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say it's very easy for airlines to say, I want to be a next generation digital retailer. I see what retailing in adjacent or other industries has become. I think if you said, great, if you had the capability and the technology tomorrow, what would you sell and how? They would probably be like, oh, well, yes, we'd have to think about that. We'd have to kind of put that. We'd have to put that story together. But it does really just exemplify that you need that foundational capability. Obviously, first you need the enabler. You need to actually be able to say to an airline, okay, here is the software and here is the technology that you now can sell anything you want. You want to sell a T-shirt with that flight? You can. You want to sell a trip to a soccer match with that flight? You can. And beyond the obvious, I want to sell a hotel and I want to sell insurance and car rental and things like this, the you could sell anything paradigm is still yet to be kind of understood well across the industry. Well, what does that anything actually look like? But still, step one is the ability to plug in third-party non-air content in a way that makes it seamless for you to sell it and service it. And I'm making a point of this because I'm reading Chris Ambanich's comment about what's important is to be able to go and do these things and do them quickly and do them at low cost and low friction points to actually start this ball rolling. And somebody needs to start this. Somebody needs to actually go and say, here's how we're going to start selling something completely different and not just sell end-to-end service, manage the whole flow of air and non-air content. And that's why I made that comment about sort of the world watching Riyadh is kind of a lot of it is focused on that. What will you kind of be selling and how do you make it so seamless and easy to do it? So.
And I think there's, I'm going to extend what you said. It's not just selling another ancillarated, if you pardon the expression, because I'm trying to mix ancillary and accelerate it together. What really you need to think about is the Taylor Swift concert or the concert, because people who are Gen Z, they want to buy experiences first. My generation, God help me, because I am that old, we used to think of, let's go to the destination. How do we get to the destination? Is it gettable? Can I get there? Then we think about where I'm going to go. What am I going to do? They don't really think about that a lot. What now is it's inverted. People are far more interested in what is the experience rather than where can I get, where does it actually occur? And I think this is where we're going to see some real changes of value that I can say, look, here is the Coldplay concert. Here is Lady Gaga. She's playing here and she's giving a free concert in the Copacabana. No tickets, but boy, can you get to Rio? Good luck, mate. But because we just don't know. And I think when you look at what people are physically doing, which channels are they talking in? What are they asking for? We need to think differently. We need to be from this, as Henry put it, we need for the organization to be customer-centric, and then think about what the products are that they want to buy, and then the servicing of that, we have to be that. But all has to be done, as you pointed out, Sam, it's got to be done in real time. So I need to be able to respond and say to somebody, yeah, buy your ticket now or don't buy your ticket now. And I think it's going to take a lot of change before people do the one thing, and I see the word trust in the comments. That's critically important. How can I trust an airline whose brand has kind of been not that great in being honest with me, now to becoming truly a trustworthy retailer that I can put my strength behind, and I as a consumer can trust them to deliver me value? And I think that's part of this business process that's missing. And I think we can do an awful lot to fix that by delivering some of these things which are realistic, actually answering the customer. I mean, some of the generation of chatbots are really awful today. And just because you've got a chatbot doesn't mean you actually have one that's useful. Lord help me. So there are things that can be done. And I think what we have to do is to consider that new universe that isn't really new, but that's where the people want. I want that one, and I expect you. What is that expectation? What is the trust that powers that expectation for you to deliver to me what I want? So buying a t-shirt may not be the right thing, but definitely buying an experience and packaging the experience because that's the reason that I want to travel.
Yeah, I think probably the most important thing is an airline being able to prove that they can improve the passenger experience incrementally, step by step, that whatever it is they sell, they'll deliver on the promise of quality, service, a better experience, because there is technology means to actually make that better than it was before. And I think that there could be any combination of things that an airline will ultimately sell, and most likely they're going to be selling things at, destination experience or something like this, a tour, kind of an attraction or something like this, along with hotel content and all of the things that are sort of tried to be sold together today. But can they do it well? Can they make it smooth? Can they remove friction? Can they show up and prove that they can handle the complexity when things go wrong, things change? Can they give a better experience to the passenger? Is step one. If you can do that, you can then increment and increment and increment.
I think you're 100% right there. Is can you do it? But I want to go further than that. I want us to be able to say that I am a place where you would go to achieve that goal. Because today what we've got is, because of the silo nature of travel in general, is I have trained the customer to go to different places. Yet the customer doesn't want that. He wants to have a nice haven where he can go and get what he wants. And if we can figure some of this stuff out, which I think some of the newer AI technologies like MCP, like A2A, it brings those things to the fore of the ability to actually do the things that you and I are talking about. And the value proposition must always be focused on the customer. Am I actually achieving not just a better experience, but am I actually delivering upon your expectation that you have for me as a brand service provider? And so I tend to go a little bit more to, and maybe I'm just anally focused on the customer, is that I think like that. I think that when I'm buying something, I want to have my purchase go to somebody that I can trust. And I think we can do that. And I think that what we're talking about, these technologies, will help us to do a far better job than we've ever been able to do before. Now, the question, I think, goes back to your point, which is, can the airline change its spots in order to do that? Is it prepared to change some of its business processes in order to achieve this goal? And I think that's what people like Henry and Chris are saying in the chat, is these are things that are of value.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
No. Yeah, well, appreciate the comments, and thank you, Henry, for joining. Good to have you on the conversation, and look forward to seeing you soon. So I think we're up against the hour, and I really want to thank you both, Sam and Timothy, for the engaging discussion. I think truly was, in my view, a thought leadership discussion on sort of where we need to take the industry. So appreciate that, and I guess we'll have there's contact information that you could see over there. So please continue to have this conversation, and we'll look forward to our next webinar on this series.
Well, thank you very much. And I would encourage anybody who's put questions into the chat or wants to reach out to any one of us, to Apurva, Sam, or myself. If you've got questions or you want to know more about this, please feel to reach out to us, and do use this email address, the travel.market.team@DataArt, as a way to continue this conversation. It is important that we are able to help people to achieve this goal. We tend to think of nirvana, but I think we can get there faster than perhaps many people think. Sam, would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think this will get faster, this will get better, this will get easier. We're starting to see it. Yeah. I appreciate the the opportunity to have a great discussion. Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.